It's just been a disastrous 2 years sheep farming for us. Hi there. If you're new here, my name is Louise and I am a sheep farmer in Eastern Ontario, Canada, and I wanted to chat with you guys about how we stayed ahead of our parasite load this year. Last year, we had a really hard time with parasites. Actually, it also started about the year before that. If you do not know about us, we moved to Eastern Ontario 2 years ago. We've been here for exactly 2 years now. When we moved to this farm, we had all intents of rotationally grazing our sheep on the pastures that were already existing here. So what you need to know about us is that we came from southwestern Ontario, where we mostly farmed our sheep intensively, which means that our sheep and our lambs were in the barn the majority of the time. They did have an outdoor paddock, but there was no grazing, there was no consuming grass. They were strictly on a hay and a grain diet. So at that farm, we really didn't experience any issues with parasites. However, when we moved here, we got hit so hard. We lost a lot of ewes, we lost some lambs, and it's just been a disastrous 2 years sheep farming for us. When we realized we had parasite issues, we obviously did do the routine stuff that we would have done at the other farm, which is deworm our sheep and try to take care of the problem. However, it just wasn't enough. We did have a visit with a new vet this spring, and we were able to sit down and put a plan together about how we were going to get ahead of this parasite load on this farm. The biggest thing for us, and that was an adjustment for me, being the sheep farmer, was setting up my rotational grazing plan. So I had done lots of research and Googled and put information together based on what other sheep farmers were saying and tried to make it work for us. However, what I was reading was that it was safe for my sheep to be on a chunk of grass and then return to that chunk of grass at least 30 days later. But here's what our vet had to say. The easiest way for us to manage this high worm load, which was obviously probably here in our wet soil, it was probably to either, one, put the sheep, it's windy. So it was, our options were to either put the sheep in the barn and keep them in the barn for 2 years, where we could hopefully eradicate all the worms that were on the premise. The other option was to set up our grazing system so that our sheep would never return on the same chunk of grass. So obviously, in order to be able to do that, you have to have a lot of land. So we run about 50 ewes and a ram, and we have about a total of 20 acres of pasture land and some silvopasture, which is bush, such as here, that they graze. So what we've done is pick a map of our land, and then I went through and I split up each section so that I figured out that we would be on a 25-week rotational grazing, and then try to only put the sheep on one chunk of land once. So I'd like to say that we were able to do that. However, we are now October 30th and we still have a couple chunks to graze. However, for the most part, we did not return to an area that was grazed. The vet did instruct me that I would be better off leaving the sheep on a section a little bit longer and allowing them to chew it down a bit more than to have them return to that section. So she said that I could leave the sheep on the one chunk they were on for 1 to 2 weeks and then moved them before the parasite had a chance to go through its entire cycle. So we did that, and it has worked out extremely well for us. We've got some very chunky, healthy, pregnant looking mamas out here. So I'm really, really happy with how everything turned out and the advice that the vet gave us, because I had never heard that before. Everything I read and everything I was told was that you could return to a chunk once it had had at least a 30-day rest. And to be honest, we were resting longer than that. So I would have thought that we would have been perfectly fine to return to our sections. So as I mentioned, we weren't able to keep them completely off every section of the field. We did return to this field here only for about a week, but this was our first field that we had gone to at the beginning of the season, so in May. So it's been months since we've been on here, and it was luscious and green, and I wanted to take advantage of the extra feed, so we did go back to this trunk. Same with this section here we're returning to. You can see that the grass is really, really long. They're not chewing close to the ground by any means. And they will be returning to the barn in about a week, at which point we're going to deworm again. So the other thing that we did was that we only dewormed at the beginning of the grazing season. We dewormed about a week before the sheep hit the grass, and we have not dewormed since. And they do look fantastic, and we haven't had any sheep that look like they might have parasites. I did notice a few roundworms in some poop this week, but I'm pretty sure that that's from one of the little ewe lambs that we decided to keep back. And again, they're going back in the barn in about a week, so they're all going to get dewormed. But we're really happy with how this all turned out for us this year, and I thought that I would just share my experience and how we got ahead of the parasites on our farm. Obviously, this information that I'm sharing here is only really going to be relevant to somebody else's situation that might have the same kind of acreage that we do and the same amount of sheep. If you have more sheep or you have less land, obviously speak to your nutritionist and your vet and see what would work best for you. But this was a pretty simple way of us maintaining our sheep health, making sure that they had enough to eat, and then getting ahead of our parasite load on our farm.